Hello and welcome back to the Training Tom podcast, the place where I share the lessons I have learned, the challenges I'm currently facing, and the questions I have for my future self. And in today's episode, I'm going to be revealing a challenge I have set myself, and it is the biggest fitness challenge I will ever attempt to complete. So let's get into it. Those of you that know me know that fitness and exercise is a huge part of my life. And I've done various fitness challenges over the years, especially in 2023, which I alluded to in a previous episode, where I set myself multiple fitness challenges to try and push myself outside of my comfort zone and to prove to myself that I can achieve the goals or attempt to achieve goals that I've set myself. Now, before I dive into the reasons, or before I even dive into what this fitness challenge is and the reasons why I want to attempt this fitness challenge, I just want to take some time to reflect on the Mental Health and Me series that I shared and the 3 episodes that you guys might have listened to, and just share some of the reflections I've had on it, but also share some of the feedback, or not the direct feedback, but just the thoughts that I have on some of the feedback that I've received from those episodes. And first of all, I'd just like to say a massive thank you to anyone who has listened to those episodes, because as I mentioned in those episodes, it's for me anyway, I feel it's very important to raise awareness around mental health and perhaps even try and change the narrative of how we perceive mental health as well. And if I can do that in even just a small way, then I feel like that is an important thing to do and also a good thing to do as well. One of the bits of feedback I received on those episodes is the different discussions that it created just between partners and within households, and how people had different perspectives and different opinions on the information that was being shared, and the relevance of that information as well. So that was very interesting to hear, that even between perhaps couples or within households, it was creating discussions. And yeah, I guess giving another person, a significant other, a family member, an opportunity to have a discussion that I'm not going to say they wouldn't have had, but perhaps just a discussion that was maybe different to things that they would normally talk about. Another bit of feedback that I had is that sometimes it can sound like that perhaps I'm sharing these lessons from an experienced place where I've put the work in and now all of a sudden I'm cured, or I've overcome these challenges and they are not an issue for me anymore. And that was really interesting to hear, and it was from a close friend of mine as well, and it was really interesting to hear, really interesting to kind of understand his perspective and his thoughts on those things. And also an eye-opening thing for me as well, in perhaps the way that I'm presenting that information, in that maybe I can present the information in a different way, and maybe I need to perhaps share some of the challenges that I'm currently facing a bit more, rather than talking about the lessons that I've learned, because I want to try and reiterate to everybody that this is something that I am still managing. You know, I still have plenty of challenges on a daily basis with my emotional well-being, or with my mental health, however you want to term it, because in my view, it is something that is never going to go away. It's something that I'm always going to have to manage. I'm going to have to manage it better, and I'm not ever going to become perfect at managing those things. Perhaps the tools that I'm using at the moment to manage my emotions and manage my mental health are working right now, but in the future they might not work as well. So maybe I have to adapt the things that I'm doing in order to manage my mental health and manage my emotions better. But it was just eye-opening for me that perhaps I'm still stuck in that bubble of trying to say the right things and trying to portray the right information. And again, it was one person's opinion, and he still gave me some really good feedback, which I really appreciate. And yeah, it's just something perhaps for me to reflect on for me to analyze these episodes and listen back to them. I listen back to them anyway, just to make sure that they are saying what I want to say. But again, listening to them a few weeks down the line, just to see what my opinions are on them, to see if I've had any reflections, and also to remind myself perhaps of some of the things that I've mentioned that I'm going to talk about in the future as well. But around that point, I'm still learning the best way for me to present this information. And I guess leading on the back of part 3 of the Mental Health and Me series, embracing discomfort, perhaps some of that discomfort that I need to embrace is around the challenges that I'm currently facing around my emotions and around my managing my mental health, and perhaps even trying to be even more open and even more honest with the way that I'm sharing that information as well. So thank you to the people that have given me feedback on those episodes. Like I say, it is really appreciated. This is only my 7th episode, I believe, this episode right now. So obviously I'm not expecting it to be perfect, and I want this to grow and evolve over the weeks and months, and hopefully even years and decades as well, to become something even better than what it is right now, and to provide even greater benefit, not just to the people currently listening to it, but perhaps people listening to it in the future as well. And I think the thing to finish on around my thoughts on the Mental Health and Me series and the reflections I have on that is particularly around raising awareness. I mentioned the big aim in that first episode was to raise awareness and perhaps change a bit of a narrative in the way that we view mental health, and we view it in social media in particular, but in the media in general. And also the creating discussions. It was really nice for me to hear that it did create discussions within households and between people that maybe they wouldn't have had, maybe they were going to have in the future anyway. But just the fact that people were having discussions with their significant others, were having discussions within their household, within their friendship groups even as well, is really nice for me to hear. And I guess that is another aim that when I reflect back on those episodes, perhaps I didn't realise it at the time, but if it creates discussions, whether you agree with my opinion or not, and I think this is a really key point for me to make, is that I don't want people to agree with what I'm saying. But if you do agree, then great. If you don't, I also don't see that as a problem, because if it creates discussions and it opens conversations between friendship groups, between significant others, between your relations, between your family members, colleagues even, whoever it might be, if it creates discussions, then especially around mental health and especially around emotional well-being, I don't see that as a good thing. It's almost like that phrase, no publicity is bad publicity. And if listening to this episode creates any form of discussion, no matter how in-depth or whether you agree with my opinions or not, if it's creating a discussion, that's the most important thing for me. So a key thing that I took away from releasing that information and sharing my experiences, what I'm struggling with perhaps, is it has created discussions, which on reflection, when I look at those episodes, is another thing that I'm really glad has come out of those episodes. So yeah, thank you everybody that did provide me with the feedback. Thank you for everybody that listened to those episodes, and from the messages that I have received, the conversations that I've had with people, it has been really useful for people to listen to in one way or another. So I'm really glad that that has been the case. And if you have found it useful and you think somebody else might find it useful, then by all means, please feel free to share it with people that might benefit from listening to those episodes. So that is just a bit of reflection on the Mental Health and Me series. And the next thing I want to talk about is an update on episode 4. So back in episode 4, I spoke about a challenge I'm currently facing, and it was around my health and some of the challenges I was facing towards the end of last year, but also the challenges I faced at the beginning of this year with managing some kind of gut related symptoms and essentially not feeling healthy. and not feeling like I'm firing on all cylinders, knowing that something wasn't quite right and it was holding me back, or I wasn't able to exercise freely, I wasn't able to have as much energy and as much vigor in my day-to-day life as what I normally would do. And I've got a bit of an update on that. So after that episode, around the time that episode was released, I had another test completed, or sent off another test, and the results of that test have come back negative, which, given how I was feeling at the start of the year, would have been concerning for me. But given how I'm feeling right now, and given how I've felt over the past, I'd say 14 to 18 days, so like 2.5 weeks, I've been feeling a lot better, which is very reassuring for me. And I have to admit, I don't think I've done anything dramatically different. I'm eating a lot more, which is perhaps a good thing. So I wasn't necessarily eating as much as I think I should have been eating throughout last year. And also with those gut-related symptoms, not feeling like I had an appetite and not feeling hungry and not wanting to eat, essentially. So I'm not going to say that I was like malnourishing myself, because I absolutely wasn't doing that. I was still eating, I just didn't have much of an appetite, and I wasn't eating as much as I normally would do. But recently, because of what this episode is about, I have been eating a lot more, and I have been feeling a lot better within myself. My energy levels have been there. My ability to exercise has definitely come back, and I do feel like I have the energy I need, not just to complete my day-to-day activities like work and responsibilities that I have, but also able to pursue my hobbies and pursue the exercise side of things, which has been a massive relief and a huge positive for me, especially with the fitness challenge that I'm going to go on to talk about in a minute, but also just for my general health and well-being. As I mentioned in the Mental Health and Me series, exercise and fitness are a huge part of my day-to-day routine. So not being able to do that freely really did take its toll on my emotional well-being. And I've noticed recently, now that I have been able to exercise, now that my health is improving, and I would say that I would actually say that I'm back to a level of health that I had at the beginning of last year. And that's very reassuring for me, because it shows that what I have been doing is working. I've also got the test results to back up that nothing is going on internally, which is very reassuring as well, and gives me the freedom to go on and pursue those exercise related goals that I have, but also to know that I can manage my nutrition freely now. And I think there are some things that I've perhaps changed in my diet, very small things that I've changed, that are having an impact on the symptoms that I was experiencing. But yes, long and short of it is I am feeling a lot better, and my plan, given that the test results have all come back negative and the doctors don't seem to have any concerns with the symptoms that I'm experiencing, I feel like I can crack on with life and perhaps put that health challenge, health concern behind me, and hopefully move forward without any significant repercussions and without any significant challenges in the future. If they do resurface, then I can reflect on that and I can get some further test results to see if there is anything going on instead. But yeah, like I said, long and short, test results have come back negative. There's nothing showing that I've got any issues. So as far as I'm concerned, as far as the doctors are concerned, I can carry on with day-to-day life without any restrictions, which is really good for me to hear. And especially given the challenge that I have set myself for this year. And the whole point of this episode, which I've been alluding to as we've gone through this episode so far, but haven't even touched on it yet. Well, now is the time for me to put everybody out of their misery, even though I'm pretty sure most people listening to this will be aware of the challenge that I have set myself for 2025. And it's a big one. It is by far the biggest challenge I have ever set myself. It's quite a daunting challenge as well, but it's something that I've wanted to do for around 2 years now. So it's not something that I've always wanted to do. I'm making that sound like it's something I've wanted to do for a very long time. It's by no means something that I've wanted to do. And actually at one point, I thought people that did this challenge were absolutely ludicrous. But a couple of years ago, something flicked a switch in my brain that said, nope, there is some benefit in doing this challenge and taking part in this fitness event. And you could benefit massively from doing it. So it's time to put you all out of your misery. If you aren't aware, I am going to be taking part in the first Ironman to be held in England for, I believe it's 5 or 6 years. I am taking part in Ironman Leeds, the first full distance Ironman to be held in England for a considerable number of years. It was originally held in Bolton, but they scrapped the full distance Ironman event. And in recent years, the only full distance Ironman events you've been able to do in the UK have been in Wales, I believe. And that is it. There have been half Ironmans in Weymouth, Swansea, Bolton, and I believe somewhere else as well. People will correct me if I'm wrong. But this will be the inaugural Ironman Leeds. Now, I booked this event back in September, October of 2024, not knowing how my health was going to be, not knowing what the routes are, and I still don't know what the routes are, but I know where the lake swim is going to be taking part. So I've got a rough idea of how that will look. But yes, Ironman Leeds. Big challenge. Very big challenge. And given how my health was towards the end of the last year, as I mentioned in the episode that I was talking about the health challenges, I didn't think at that stage I would be able to take part in the event because of the symptoms that I was experiencing. Now that those symptoms have pretty much disappeared, I'm actually feeling very excited to take part. But I want to talk about a bit today in this episode why I've decided to do an Ironman. Because like I say, 3 or 4 years ago, if somebody said to me, Tom, do you fancy doing an Ironman? I would have said, you're out of your mind. Why on earth would you want to put yourself through that? But that's changed. And it's changed quite dramatically because now I actively am seeking out those challenges. It's leading on from the final episode in the Mental Health and Me series, part 3 of Embracing Discomfort. Doing the Ironman previously would have put the fear of God in me. How on earth am I going to exercise for potentially 14, 15, 16 hours? Why on earth would I want to put my body through a challenge of that magnitude? And who in their right mind thinks that is a sane thing to do? A psychologically healthy thing to do? And there might be some of you that are sitting there listening to this or on your weekly, daily commute into work thinking exactly the same thing. Tom, there is no sanity involved in that. Maybe you need to go and see a doctor, not about the gut issues you've been experiencing, but about psychological issues, because why on earth would you want to put yourself through that Ironman? Well, for those of you that do know me, you know that when it comes to fitness, health, or when it comes to fitness and exercise, I push the boundaries. And I like to push my body to its limits. And thinking of embracing that discomfort, I don't think I have ever pushed my body to its limit. Every single fitness challenge that I did in 2023, I knew deep down, regardless of how the training regardless of how the training went, I would probably be able to complete those events anyway. I had a bit of a hiccup in my Ironman, in my triathlon training for the Olympic distance triathlon I did, and I still managed to complete it in a fairly decent time. Yes, it was challenging, but the duration of time that I was exercising for mentally, I knew was absolutely manageable. Same for the 100-mile bike ride, same for the 10K. I'd say the same for the marathon. As arrogant as that might sound, I completed the marathon and thought I could have done that quicker. And the day after that, I thought I could quite happily go out for another run today. I didn't feel that fatigued and too challenged by completing it, which I know for a lot of people might sound ridiculous. But I didn't find it that challenging, which is a really horrible thing to say because it is a huge challenge. And I think anybody that completes a marathon deserves a pat on the back, deserves the medal that they receive, because it is a huge undertaking. Given my background in sport and exercise, given the amount of training that I do, it wasn't as challenging as I thought it would be. So I was left, after I did the marathon, after I did the 100-mile bike ride, after I did the Olympic distance triathlon, I was left with questions in my mind. One of those questions is, what is your limit? Because you haven't found it yet. And I think that doing this Ironman will expose what the boundary is and mentally expose whether I can push through it. Because I've got a coach for my Ironman, and when I first spoke to my coach and first was introduced to him, he said, you're going to hit the wall at some point, but then you'll push through it. Then you'll hit it again, and then you'll push through it again. And you might hit it several times throughout the Ironman event. And every single time, if you want to get to that finish line, you're going to have to push through it. So that's one of the reasons why I'm doing it. It's because I want to find out what my limits are. I don't think I've ever come anywhere close to my physical limits. And doing this Ironman will expose that. It will push me to my absolute limits, both in training and in the event itself, because I have, apart from hiking, where I think I've hiked for 8 hours, 6 to 8 hours before, I haven't done any form of exercise for this length of time. And I know that it will expose me. But I think it will expose me mentally more than it will physically. I'm very much of the belief, and perhaps this is why I didn't find the marathon as challenging as I thought I would do. I'm very much of the belief that physically I can achieve anything I put my mind to. If I say that I'm going to do this Ironman physically, I know that I'll be able to complete it. Because I know that I can fuel my body properly. I know that I can put the training in and put the hours in to complete that event physically. The big challenge for me with this event is mentally. When I'm cycling out there on my own, when I haven't got the support around me, because I'm hoping that I will have some support up there in Leeds, but I won't have them with me all the time. So when I don't have that support around me, when I'm potentially cycling through the Yorkshire Dales, going up a hill, legs feel like they've got nothing in them, mentally, how am I going to cope with that? How am I going to cope with the anxious thoughts that might arise in my mind as I'm going through that event? When I hit the wall, am I going to be able to mentally push through that barrier? Because physically I know that I can do it, but mentally, can I push through it? And that is very much leading back to that embracing discomfort that I spoke about in part 3 of Mental Health and Me. It's embracing that discomfort of not knowing how you're going to react in that situation. It's the same for anybody that learns first aid. If you learn first aid, you practice CPR and how to be a first responder on a dummy mannequin thing. The chest clicks as you do chest compressions. You say all the right things and you do all the right things in that practice environment. And I've been in this situation. It's not until you're in a live situation where you have a real person with real memories and real body parts, essentially, that you realise how you're going to respond. Do you respond the same way that your training has trained you to? Or does your fight or flight response kick in and you panic and you don't do the things that you're meant to do? You don't say the things that you're meant to say. And I think this will very much be a similar scenario. I can train as much as I can, but nothing is going to prepare me for exercising for potentially 16 hours plus. At no point in my training, in my sport and exercise science brain, at no point in my training is my coach going to program in a full distance Ironman before the event. I might do a half distance Ironman as preparation. I might do an Olympic distance triathlon as preparation, but I will not do a full distance Ironman until the day. And I will not have any training sessions that last probably more than 6 hours, 6 or 7 hours. Now I will have to double that duration of time and potentially add even more time onto the end of that. So nothing can prepare you for it. So I have to embrace the discomfort of not knowing how my body is going to respond physically, but more importantly, how I will respond mentally to that situation, to that challenge. How am I going to handle the nerves before the event? How am I going to handle the excitement before the event? How am I going to handle coming out of the swim and already be exercising for an hour and a half, 2 hours, knowing that I've got potentially 10, 12, 14 hours ahead of me? For those of you that don't know what an Ironman is, probably now is a good time for me to say actually what is involved. It's a form of triathlon. It's a 3.8 kilometre swim, a 180 kilometre cycle, and a 42.2 kilometre run back to back. So you start off with the swim, you swim 3.8 kilometres, you then go into transition, you change out of your wetsuit, you put on your cycling clothing, and you go out for a 180 kilometre bike ride. You then come back into transition again, and you finish with 42.2 kilometres of running. Or in other words, you finish with a marathon. Now I have done a 100-mile bike ride, which is around 164, 162 kilometres. So I'm there or thereabouts with the cycle. I've run a marathon, so I know that I can complete 42.2 kilometres. The furthest I've swum, I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, is about 2.5 kilometres. So I've got a bit of a distance to go to build the swim up. But I feel pretty confident with all of those disciplines in isolation. It's doing them one after the other that is going to be challenging. So that is what an Ironman is. I probably should have mentioned that earlier in the episode, but it just came to mind. If people don't know what an Ironman is, that's what lays ahead of me. 3.8 kilometre swim, transition, 180 kilometre cycle, transition again, and a 42.2 kilometre run. So yeah, that's what I've let myself in for. And I've explained already why I'm doing that. The element of embracing discomfort, not knowing what the outcome is going to be. not knowing how I'm going to cope throughout that event, mentally and physically. And it's about finding my limits, trying to understand where my boundaries are. And maybe some people can relate to that. Maybe there are other people that would rather not know where their boundaries are, and that's absolutely fine. I don't have a problem with that whatsoever. I just feel like I'm not built that way. The way that I've explained this to some people is I am trying to break myself by doing this Ironman. And by breaking myself, I might find out where the limit is. Now, if I complete this Ironman and I haven't broken myself, mentally, physically, both, spiritually even, I don't know what else. I don't know whether I'll be able to want to take it a step further. I know that there are more challenging things out there, and there are some other challenges that I would like to do once I've completed this Ironman. But the most important thing for me is getting to the start line, healthy and injury-free. And then the second most important thing is getting to the finish line. And as long as I get to the finish line, how important is getting to the finish line? If I break myself in the process of the Ironman and it forces me not to get to the finish line, have I achieved my objective? Yes. My objective was to find my boundaries, and if I find my boundary and I can't push past it and I can't finish, I suppose I've achieved my goal. However, will I be disappointed in myself if I don't get to the finish line? It's easy for me to say this, given that I haven't started the event yet. And maybe, in fact, there's no maybe about it, I will be doing a podcast episode on this once I've completed the Ironman. But at this moment in time, given that I am sitting in the comfort of my own home, I'm pain-free, and actually I've had a rest day today from my training, it's easy for me to say that I will be disappointed if I don't get to the finish line. If I don't walk away with a medal and bragging rights for the rest of my life, then I will be disappointed. At this moment in time. Maybe that will change as I move forwards with training and as I get closer to the event. But at this moment in time, I will be disappointed if I don't get to the finish line. So that's another question that I have for my future self is, are you going to get to the finish line? Keep listening over the coming weeks and months to find out. I also had some other reflections on why I'm doing this Ironman. And it's only been in recent weeks, in recent days even actually, that I've had these reflections. And it is built off of some of the things that I discussed in the Mental Health and Me series. One of the things that I mentioned was I have a core belief that I am not enough, or that I'm not good enough. In that reflection, or in the reflections that I've had recently, this was spurred from a video that I watched. Was it a video or did I read it? I think it was in a video that I watched, where someone was talking about their feeling of inadequacy when they were a child, or that not feeling enough, spurred them on to participate in sport, because sport provided tangible results that told you whether you were enough or not. If you finished in first place, if your team won their match, if you won a competition, it was a tangible thing that told you you were good enough. And this blew my socks off, because I'm a very sporty person. I sometimes, actually there's no sometimes about it, I often use exercise as a crutch. And it made me think a lot about why I exercise. Now, yes, I know the health benefits of exercise, But why did I play sport when I was younger? Was it because I enjoyed it, or was it because I wanted to feel enough? Why am I doing this Ironman? Is it because I want to embrace discomfort? And yes, it is because I want to embrace discomfort. Is it because I want to try and find my limits? Yes, it is because I want to try and find my limits. Is it because I want to have a physical and a mental challenge and see whether I can cope with that? Yes, it is. But underlying all of that, is it still a core belief that I don't feel enough? And by completing this Ironman, am I finally going to be able to give myself justification to show that I am enough? And Lord Almighty, when I had that reflection, it really messed with my head, because I think part of it is also that. As much as it pains me to say it, I still think, or I now think, completing this Ironman might finally give me justification that I am enough. No matter how much work I am putting in to give myself that justification anyway, there might still be something niggling in the back of my mind that tells me I'm not enough. But if I finish an Ironman, then maybe that tiny voice in the back of my head that says, you're still not enough, will go, yeah, you know what, fair play, you did it, you are enough, don't worry about it. So that's a question, again, for me to answer when, not if, when I finish the Ironman. 27th of July, I haven't mentioned the date, 27th of July, if anybody's interested. On the 27th of July, when I cross the finish line, and in the days after that, I am going to answer the question, am I now enough? So a question I have for my future self. Is completing an Ironman, or does completing an Ironman make you good enough? A question that I'll answer when I completed the Ironman. And this is something else that I'm going to talk about. And it's about the process involved in this. I've spoken a lot about getting to the finish line and when I get to the finish line. But I think a lot of the learning is going to come in the process. The process of managing a work-life balance with training for an event like this. The learning of being disciplined in completing a challenge. Thinking about the things that I spoke about in embracing discomfort. Am I going to keep the promises to myself? That if I say I'm going to do a training session at this time on this day, that I'm going to do that training session. Am I going to hold myself accountable, essentially? Now I have got a coach and I'm paying for this coach. So he will hold me accountable, but also paying somebody to design a program naturally increases your want to do that program. Because ultimately you are paying somebody money to tell you what to do, or at least to guide you in how to train for an event like this. Very similar to if you were to get a personal trainer. If you're paying a personal trainer, they will tell you what to do, or they will coach you on what to do, give you advice and give you guidance. But it's still up to you to do the work. And it's up to me to make sure that when my coach programs in sessions, I get those sessions done to the best of my ability. And I get those sessions done knowing what the outcome of those sessions is as well, which my coach and I discuss weekly anyway. You know, we send voice notes, and yeah, he explains what the purpose of those sessions are and how I should be feeling when I get to the end of the week, which is really useful. Now, if that changes, we've got quite an open dialogue where I can share how I've been feeling and what changes that I might have made to the training. But I've got to be disciplined with that, and I think there'll be a lot of learning to come with that process. And I think the biggest thing, yes, finishing the event will be huge, but I think the biggest, or one of the biggest lessons that I can take from this is that if I put my mind to something, then I can follow the process. Kind of linking back to the goals that I set myself in 2023. Following a process, being consistent with that training. I spoke about consistency in the last episode, and consistency is so important. It's something that I've not always been very good at. So again, something that I want to learn through this process is being consistent, being disciplined with what I'm doing, learning how to fuel my body properly, knowing how to plan a week, being organized with my time. My lord, my friends know how bad I am at timekeeping, and they will probably be chuckling to that statement, because I am so bad, and I'll openly admit this, I am terrible at managing my time, terrible at managing my time in my personal life. I'm very carefree when it comes to time management in my personal life. Professional life, a little bit different. Personal life, I arrive late to things, I don't really mind when we do things. Just tell me a time and a place, and I'll be at that place roughly around the time that I should be, probably 5, 10, 15 minutes late. But anywho, I digress. Time management is going to be a big lesson for me in this process. Planning is going to be a big lesson in this process. Organisation skills, I'm hoping to develop in my personal life. All of these things that perhaps I'm good at in my professional life, but haven't transferred those skills into my personal life just yet. And this Ironman is definitely going to challenge those personal life aspects of things, and how I'm able to manage relationships, how I'm able to manage socializing, how I'm able to manage my mental health, my recovery, my nutrition. Life in general throws up all sorts of curveballs, so how am I going to be able to manage those things when they arise? So yes, there we have it, everyone. For anybody that wasn't aware, I am going to be attempting to complete Ironman Leeds on the 27th of July. And where can you keep track of all of this training, and if you're interested, what training I'm doing, how I'm feeling about my training? Well, I'm going to be sharing some episodes, but I don't want this podcast to turn into a fitness podcast. So what I will do instead is I'm going to be dedicating a bit more of the content that I produce on Instagram towards my training content and towards the Ironman prep. And I would also like to be releasing some episodes on YouTube as well. And a good friend of mine reached out to me a few weeks ago to offer some support with that. So I need to get in touch with him, and I need to start setting the wheels in motion. So all I'll say on the YouTube side of things is watch this space. I will be providing some updates, one episode maybe every 6 to 8 weeks, to give you an idea of how preparation is going for the Ironman, but I'm not going to be dedicating lots of time towards the Ironman, because I want this podcast to be separate from fitness and from sharing a fitness journey. I will share lessons that I'm learning from fitness and exercise, challenges that I'm facing, questions I have for my future self, but I want to keep it very much to the values that I've set for this podcast and the purpose that I've set for this podcast. I don't want it to be a fitness and a training podcast. So I won't be sharing much information on my training, but I will drop in bits here and there and updates sporadically over the coming months. But if you want to follow more of that content, then Instagram will be the place to go. And in the near future, I won't dedicate a date to it just yet. So keep an eye out on Instagram for a date for that. But YouTube, I want to be releasing some content onto YouTube. So let's see what the future holds. I have been rambling on about an Ironman and why I'm doing it and all sorts of different things for, I'm sure, far too long now. So I'm going to bring this episode to a close. My biggest challenge, my biggest fitness challenge ever is going to be completing Ironman Leeds on the 27th of July. I'm excited for it. I'm nervous for it. I'm trying to understand what my life is going to look like over the next, over the next 6 months. But I have lots of questions, lots of challenges that I'm going to be facing, lots of lessons that I'm hoping to learn as well. And in the future, I am absolutely certain I'll be able to share some of those things as well. So watch this space. If you want to keep up with the training content, head over to my Instagram page and in the near future, YouTube as well. But for now, as always, thank you for listening. My name is Tom Regan, and this right here is the Training Tom podcast.